The sheriff looked me straight in the eyes and said, "Sir, unless you can prove this house is yours in the next 10 minutes, I'm legally required to remove you from your own property." I remember staring at him in complete disbelief. Not because I had done anything wrong, but because I had lived in that house for 32 years. I had buried my wife from that front porch. I had watched my daughter take her first steps in that living room. And somehow, an HOA president standing 20 feet away with a smug smile had convinced everyone that I was the trespasser. What happened in that courtroom 3 weeks later left an entire county speechless. Before I tell you how one forgotten document destroyed the most powerful HOA in our state, let me tell you how it all began. My name is Alaric Thorne. I'm 68 years old, retired railroad engineer, widower, and until recently, I believed that honesty still mattered. I was wrong. The house sat on the edge of Ashmore Ridge, a quiet neighborhood outside Asheville, North Carolina. Most people move there for the peaceful views. I stayed because every inch of that land carried memories of my late wife, Eloan. She planted every rose bush with her own hands. Every spring, those roses bloomed like clockwork. After she passed away from cancer, taking care of them became my way of talking to her. Life wasn't exciting. Coffee at sunrise, fishing twice a week, church every Sunday, helping neighbors whenever they needed a hand. That was enough for me. Everything changed the day the new HOA president arrived. Her name was Karen Voss. She wasn't from our town. She had moved from another state after buying one of the largest homes in the subdivision. From the moment she arrived, she acted as though the neighborhood belonged to her. Within weeks, she introduced dozens of new HOA rules. Mailbox colors, grass height, holiday decorations, parking regulations, even a number of flower pots allowed on a porch. Most neighbors grumbled, but paid the fines anyway. I didn't. Not because I enjoyed conflict, because my property had never legally been part of the HOA. I'd known that since the day I bought it decades earlier. The previous owner made sure I understood. "Your lot predates the subdivision," he'd told me. "They'll probably try someday, don't let them." I never imagined those words would become a warning. One Tuesday morning, I found an envelope taped to my front door. Final notice: $7,850 in unpaid HOA assessments. Failure to comply may result in legal action and property enforcement. I laughed. Honestly, I thought someone had made a mistake. So I walked to the HOA office carrying every deed and survey I'd kept in a weathered leather folder for over 30 years. Corinne barely looked up from her desk. "Can I help you?" I slid the documents across the table. "You're billing the wrong property." She glanced at the papers for less than 5 seconds before pushing them back. "Our attorney has already reviewed ownership. Ma'am, my property isn't part of your association." She smiled. Not kindly. The kind of smile people wear when they've already decided you're beneath them. "Mr. Thorne, everyone says that. I have certified surveys. Those surveys are outdated. They're county records. Then the county is wrong." That sentence should have warned me. Instead, I thanked her and left. I still believed facts mattered. 3 days later, contractors appeared outside my house. Without asking permission, they began removing my fence. I ran outside shouting, "Stop! What are you doing?" One worker shrugged. "HOA order." I demanded paperwork. They handed me a work authorization signed by Karen Voss. Property improvement enforcement. I called the sheriff. Surely this would end quickly. It didn't. When Deputy Nolan arrived, Corinne greeted him like an old friend. She handed him a thick folder before I even spoke. For nearly 15 minutes, they stood together reviewing papers while I waited beside my own mailbox. Finally, the deputy walked toward me. "Mr. Thorne, the HOA claims your property falls within their recorded expansion boundary." "That's impossible. I need to see your documents." I brought out my leather folder. He studied every page carefully. Unlike Corinne, he actually read them. His expression changed. "I don't understand." Corinne interrupted before he finished. "Those copies are decades old." The deputy frowned. "They appear certified." Corinne folded her arms. "We've already filed updated records." Updated? I had never heard those words before. The deputy looked caught between two completely different sets of paperwork. I think this needs civil court. Karen smiled again. Exactly. Then she looked directly at me. Until then, every HOA regulation applies. I watched those workers finish tearing down the fence my wife had painted herself. That night, I couldn't sleep. Something felt wrong. Not mistaken. Planned. The next morning, my neighbor, Benedict Hale, knocked quietly on my door. He was 74, former county surveyor, one of the smartest men I'd ever known. He looked nervous. Alaric, what's wrong? He glanced toward Karen's house before speaking. I saw something at the county records office last week. My stomach tightened. What did you see? He lowered his voice. Someone requested copies of subdivision maps, then asked for files dating back to the 1950s. Who? Karen. I stared at him. Why would she need records that old? He hesitated. Because I don't think she's trying to find you. He swallowed hard. I think she's trying to erase you. Those words echoed in my mind all afternoon. By Friday, things became even stranger. A moving company arrived. Not at Karen's house. Edmina. The driver stepped out holding paperwork. Sir, we're here for the scheduled property turnover. I blinked. Property what? He handed me a court filing. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. Someone had filed documents claiming ownership of my home. And according to those papers, I was occupying the property illegally. I looked across the street. Karen stood on her porch, coffee in one hand, smiling, as if she'd already won. I had no idea. The biggest betrayal wasn't coming from the HOA. It was waiting inside the county courthouse. The county courthouse smelled like old paper, polished wood, and decades of hard decisions. I had been inside only once before, when Alone and I signed the papers that officially made the house ours. Now I was back, being told I might lose it. Karen Voss entered the courtroom wearing a tailored navy suit, carrying herself like someone who had already rehearsed her victory speech. Several HOA board members followed behind her, whispering confidently. I stood alone. At least, that's what I thought. Mr. Thorne? I turned. An elderly woman with silver hair extended her hand. My name is Morel Ashcombe. I represent the family that originally developed Ashmore Ridge. I didn't hire an attorney. I know. Then why are you here? She smiled gently. Because someone forged history. Those 4 words hit harder than anything I'd heard in weeks. Court began precisely at 9. Karen's attorney confidently argued that updated subdivision records prove my property had been absorbed into the HOA years earlier. He displayed colorful maps, recent filings, new boundary lines. Everything looked official. The judge listened carefully. Then he turned toward us. Mr. Thorne, your response? Morel stood. Your Honor, we'd like permission to introduce Exhibit 12. The courtroom clerk wheeled in an oversized tube. Inside were survey maps, so old the paper had turned a light shade of brown. Morel carefully spread them across a large display table. These are the certified development plats filed before Ashmore Ridge ever existed. The room became silent. She pointed to one parcel. My client's property. Then another. The future subdivision. Then she tapped the narrow strip separating them. This strip was never transferred. Karen shifted in her seat. For the first time, she looked uncomfortable. The judge leaned forward. Explain. Morel nodded. When Ashmore Ridge was developed 43 years ago, one parcel remained outside the HOA because its owner refused to sell. That parcel was later purchased by Mr. Alaric Thorne. She paused. His deed references that exclusion on every recorded transfer. The judge adjusted his glasses. I don't see that on the HOA map. You won't. Why? Because someone removed it. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Karen's attorney immediately objected. Speculation. Morel calmly lifted another folder. No, Your Honor. She handed it to the bailiff. This contains archived microfilm copies obtained directly from the state's historical land registry. The judge compared both maps side by side. They were different. One showed my property outside the HOA. The newer filing placed it inside. Only one question remained. Who changed it? The county records supervisor was called to testify. He looked nervous before even taking the oath. Morel asked only one question. When was the updated boundary map submitted? 6 months ago. Who submitted it? He looked toward Corinne. The Ashmore Ridge Homeowners Association. Were original ownership deeds reviewed? No. Were neighboring property owners notified? No. Were independent surveys conducted? No. So the map was accepted based solely on the application. Yes. The silence that followed felt heavier than thunder. Corinne finally stood. This is ridiculous. We were correcting an administrative mistake. Morel calmly replied. Then why did your board begin issuing fines before the correction was approved? No answer. And why did contractors remove Mr. Thorne's fence before ownership was decided? Still nothing. And why was an eviction filing prepared before this hearing? Corinne's confidence disappeared. Then came the moment no one expected. Benedict Hale slowly walked to the witness stand. The retired county surveyor carried a weathered notebook. I kept field notes for every survey I completed. He opened the notebook to a page dated 34 years earlier. I personally verified the markers around Mr. Thorne's property. He pointed toward the map. The original granite boundary stone still exists. Corinne laughed nervously. It could have been moved. Benedict smiled. No. How can you be certain? Because I set myself. The judge immediately ordered a recess. That afternoon, the court authorized an emergency inspection. Everyone, including the attorneys, the survey team, and both parties, traveled to my property. There, buried beneath decades of grass and soil, they found it. A granite survey monument. Exactly where Benedict said it would be. The original boundary marker. Untouched. Unmoved. Impossible to argue with. Back in court, the judge delivered his decision. The evidence clearly establishes that Mr. Thorne's property has never been part of the Ashmore Ridge Homeowners Association. He looked directly at Corinne. The HOA had no authority to fine him, remove improvements from his property, or initiate eviction proceedings. I closed my eyes. For the first time in weeks, I could finally breathe. But the judge wasn't finished. I'm also referring the altered filings and supporting documents to the appropriate authorities for further investigation. Corinne's face turned pale. The same confident smile she'd worn on my lawn was gone. Weeks later, workers returned to my property, not to tear anything down, to rebuild. The fence was restored exactly as it had been. Neighbors volunteered to repaint it. Someone even replanted Alohan's rose bushes where the construction crews had damaged them. When spring arrived, the roses bloomed again, just like they always had. Sometimes I sit on that same front porch with a cup of coffee and watch the sunrise. The house is still quiet. I still miss Alohan every single day, but every time I see those roses, I remember something important. A home isn't protected by an HOA. It isn't protected by power. And it certainly isn't protected by the loudest person in the neighborhood. Sometimes, it's protected by one old deed, one honest surveyor, and the courage to refuse to surrender what was never theirs to take.